Hello and welcome to this tutorial. Today we're going to make a chisel handle, a London Pattern Chisel Handle, and the London Pattern Chisel Handle is a traditional and very decorative type of chisel handle that goes back many years, made by many of the British chisel makers for the top of the line chisels that they were making. It's very elegant and attractive and is being reproduced by a number of companies to this day. So we're going to make that from a piece of hardwood, and we're going to start with a blank square piece of timber which we turn into an octagon shape before doing the turning components. So what we see here is our blank that we're going to work on. We're going to divide it into half and do some basic pencil marks in preparation for some simple planing before we get on to the turning work. So I divide in half and then divide that into quarters, and those quarters give us the guideline for where we are going to be planing down to. We hold that in the vise and simply plane down on the angle to give us the octagonal faces that we need. We find center by sight. It's much better than measurements. You'll be able to see by sight whether you're in the middle or not. It's more likely that you'll slip into a bit of the soft growth which will knock you off center, and you'll be able to see that straight away. So trust your eye, and that's going to set you up for a good turning project. So we're ready to put this into our lathe, and what we're going to do, because it's a chisel handle that has a tang that has to go up into the handle, we need to start by drilling a hole in the end. So we're just marking off the important lengths that are going to be on our chisel, and that includes a little bit of waste at the end. We're going to have a ferrule on the chisel end that helps to make that end very strong, and we're going to have a number of different considerations. Here we're using a vernier gauge to measure the inside of the ferrule, which has to be one of the measurements that we need for our turning. So we're going to use the scroll chuck to hold the blank in position. I've put the other end in the live center and have it spinning correctly. I've only just clamped it in lightly, but now I clamp it in tightly so that I can move away the tailstock, change the live center for another center that has a drill bit in it. So this is actually a chuck with a drill bit in it. I lock that into place, and that goes right into the center where we want it to, and that is the most guaranteed way of getting a really accurate, nicely centered hole that goes straight up the middle of our blank. And that's important in order to allow the chisel tang to go up accurately, not at an angle, and for the chisel to function really well. So we've changed the tailstock back over to a live center, and you can now see, only just, but you can see the lines for those important elements. Now we're just taking away some material up to the first line, which is the width of the ferrule, and I've gone just a little bit too big there, I suspect, and so it's now time to use my vernier gauges set at the inside diameter of my ferrule, and I hold that while using the parting tool to take it down to size. It's very probably a little bit too big. Normally you need to go very gently so that you don't take away too much, but I'm going to remove it from the chuck now. And yes, it is just a little bit too tight. If I tried to hammer that in now, it would be a frustrating job. So I'm just changing my chuck over so that I now have a spur center. That's the most standard way for turning between centres, and that's this particular type of spur centre just fits into my scroll chuck. And I'm just going to take just the smallest amount more off because it nearly fitted but not quite, so you might have to have 2 or 3 goes at this. It is going to fit now, and so I just hammer it home, and that's now in position, ready to continue on with the rest of the chisel. Now the other main marks that I have on my blank, we'll see when it starts turning. There is the section in the middle which remains the octagonal section. There is some waste at the very end which will not be part of the chisel handle. We always allow a bit of waste. Always make sure that your tool rest is nicely firm. And we go to various depths. We have to consider where we're going, but I'm just going either side of that octagonal section and just taking it down to the point where it is round. That's as far as we need to go there, and I'm just removing some of the waste from both of those ends. We slightly taper towards the tip down a little bit thinner for the look that we're after. You'll notice that sometimes I actually rub the end of my chisels to remove debris and things like that. That's not necessarily a good habit to get into, but what I tend to do is I tend to rub it to remove the material, and I always rub against the direction of the blade so that there's no risk of cutting myself. So you can see that we've virtually got a chisel handle there. We're now going to use the detail gouge to round over the butt end of the chisel, the bit that is going to be struck by the mallet, and we round it over to a certain extent. We are now just going to do a small taper that comes in from the octagonal section into the round section, just to make that look elegant and nice. And I'm just going to do a small decorative line around, just a little bit down from the top. Another taper, and I'm just going to go that little bit deeper because the design is going to have a little step in the design. And while I've got my detail gouge, I'm also just going to take this in, being careful not quite to touch the brass of the ferrule, but basically go down to within 0.5 millimetre or so of it. Back to my roughing gouge, which is useful for roughing, but it's also useful for any big concave areas, and so it's the right tool for doing a nice cutting job that describes the shape that we're after for our London Pattern Chisel Handle. And just to finish that off, we go to sandpaper. Cloth covered sandpaper is, in my opinion, the best sort of sandpaper. We don't sand the octagonal section on the lathe. We would sand it by hand a little bit later, remembering that it is a series of 8 flat faces, so to sand it on the lathe would vibrate a lot, but wouldn't sand very well. Now we're just in the process of parting off our project so that it is completely separate. We've lost our waste and we've finished our job. Ready for a final sand, an oil or ester pole, and our job is finished. Thanks for watching.